Hi, welcome to the Brief Book Reviews channel, otherwise known as An Old Guy Reviews the Book that he's read this week. So what's the old guy read this week? Well, the book I've read this week is this one. It's called Camino Ghosts by author John Grisham. Was published by Hodder and Stoughton here in the UK as a hardback on the 20th of May 2024. And I guess it's the third in the Camino series. Previous books by Grisham were called Camino Island, Camino Winds. So this is the third in that series, if you will. So what's it all about, I hear you say? Well, book kicks off with a lady called Mercer. Mercer man, she's marrying her boyfriend Thomas on the beach at Camino Island. Person conducting the ceremony is a guy called Bruce, who owns the local bookshop, Bay Books, a friend of Mercer's, and great and good at Camino Island there, watching the ceremony, as well as friends and family. And also Mercer she's a professor. She teaches creative writing at Old Miss. One of the students there is playing some music, and the event goes well. Bruce says to Mercer, you've got a problem getting a hold of an idea for a second book, because Mercer's written a couple of short stories and a couple of novels, and the last one, Tessa, was very well received, and she's very pleased with that. But she signed a two-book deal with her current publisher and needs an idea for the second book. So Mercer and Thomas are off on their honeymoon to Scotland the next day, and Bruce says, pop into the bookshop before you go. I've got something I think you might be interested in. So next day they do. And Bruce presents Mercer with this book. He says, I'll read that while you're on the plane to Scotland on your honeymoon. And she says, what's this? He said, well, a lady popped into my shop years ago. Her name's Lovely Jackson. She claims to be the last inhabitant of the Dark Isle. You've heard of the Dark Isle? And Mercer says, yeah, I've heard of the Dark Isle. Spooky place, former island where slaves used to live. There were people that had been enslaved were living. Sailors won't go near it. Talks of curses, a bit of a dodgy place, and uninhabitable apart from, a couple of panthers and rattlesnakes. And Bruce says, yeah, well, just read this book. This is Lovely Jackson's story. She claims to be the last inhabitant of Dark Isle. She was born in 1940, left in 1955. But it's an interesting story. It's a story of how a slave ship en route from Africa to Georgia was caught in a terrible storm, capsized. Some of the slaves escaped and made their way to the Dark Isle and set up effectively a colony there. Also, slaves that were in Georgia used this as a go-to destination to escape to, because at the time Georgia was under British rule and slavery was allowed. At the time Florida was under Spanish rule, and although slavery wasn't outlawed, they turned a blind eye to the slaves, the people who had escaped slavery that lived on the Dark Isle. Eventually that colony finished, but Lovely wanted to write a book about it, for posterity. So Mercer says, yeah, I understand that, but that story's been written. Why would I be interested? He says, well, the thing is, Dark Isle previously had never been viewed as a possible real estate development area because it cost too much to build a bridge there. But after Hurricane Leo, all the sands underneath have been disturbed terribly, and it's now potentially viable to build a bridge there. And there's a real estate developer based out of Miami called Tidal Breeze that want to basically develop Dark Isle. They're going to call it Panther Cay Resort, and it's going to have the lot: hotels, golf courses, even a casino. Now, I don't think that's a great idea. Anyway, read the book while you're on honeymoon. So Mercer does, and she finds it a fascinating story of the tragedy of the people that ended up there and the hard life that they had. So when she comes back from honeymoon, she says, what, I think this is worth a punt. Let's see if we can get a meeting with Lovely. And sure enough, they eventually do. Mercer gets an agreement from her agent to write a non-fiction book, the story of that, with the added twist of the real estate developer trying to develop it. They contact a guy called Stephen Mahon, who's a pro bono environmental lawyer on the island, and thus that's basically the tale. It's a David versus Goliath type battle of Mercer, an aspiring author, lovely, an elderly lady who wants to protect the history of the Dark Isle, and Stephen, the pro bono lawyer, as well as Bruce and a few of his author mates, against a vast corporation that can have a van load of lawyers on the scene immediately. So eventually a court case is brought. Stephen brings the court case, and they're trying to justify that Lovely is the actual owner of the Dark Isle. They quote the environmental benefit, the fact that there are lots of people buried there, people died there, there's a cemetery there. You can't just bulldoze it and build hotels and golf courses. So the eventual, we eventually get to a court case where you've got the environmental, the motley crew from Camino Island battling against a vast real estate giant, as well as, of course, the state of Florida, because there are adverse possession laws in the state of Florida. Apparently it's 7 years, and they're saying, well, there's lots of uninhabited islands off of Florida, and as far as we're concerned, the state owns them. So that, in fact, is the tale. So it's the build-up of the good guys, bad guys, bureaucrats getting in the way, and the fight for the Dark Isle. I'd say it's a slightly different Grisham. Grisham can tell the tale of the ebb and flow of a court case like no other. And whilst this is the central theme of this book is the court case between the good guys and the bad guys and the fight to save Dark Isle, we also see Grisham as a storyteller. There's a very, very, we see excerpts of Lovely's book about the Dark Isle and the history, the hardships that these people had to endure and the history of it. So it's much more of a story than the normal run-of-the-mill Grisham court case book. So I enjoyed it. I'd give it 7 out of 10. If I was being picky, I'd say it probably dropped off a bit towards the end of the book. But, Grisham's a good author. Very rarely get a bad book from Grisham. This would be an ideal summer read. It's only 292 pages. The story itself is relatively straightforward, the fight to save the Dark Isle from the developers, but there's also the backstory of the Dark Isle, which is well written, and it's a good story. So a great summer read. So as I said, I'd give it 7 out of 10. That's it for this week's brief book review. 10/10 till we do it again. Thanks for watching. Bye.